been living life like it's a sequel, and you're already bored with the plot, as if the cast and the score are more money than before, but the script and the backdrops are stock. We've got the rest of our lives to regret all the words that were said here tonight, but I'll bet that the morning, in the morning, will find us in bloom. So come on, come on, come on, let's not be our parents. Come on, come on, come on, let's follow this through. Yeah, come on, come on, come on, everything's waiting. We'll be lit up like fire and gold, and everything. Everything's new. When 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 everything's new.
This is where it all began for Dennis Martinez. In a nice San Diego neighborhood, two loving parents and a supportive family.
Just grew up here, in a good neighborhood, Bay Park, kind of by Mission Bay. I came from a good house. Mom and Dad stayed together forever.
As a little boy, Dennis was very, very energetic, very lovable little guy.
Dennis was quite a hyper young kid. One second you turn around, he'd be gone. And I remember times that my parents would actually have to pay him $1 just so he would sit down and be quiet for 5 minutes.
Growing up, the sports, baseball was pretty much the sport.
His hand and eye coordination were great. He played all sports. He was also an excellent tennis player. But then all of a sudden, he just kind of took a love for the skateboard.
I remember one time coming home, it was I just was going from 6th grade to 7th grade, and I was coming home from summer school. About a mile away from my house, I saw this guy skateboarding. And he was doing a handstand. I'd never seen anybody doing a handstand on the skateboard.
Amazing.
That just totally sent me over the top, and I had to meet him. So I went up and started talking to him, and when I found out that he was a pro skater, I spent most of my time over at his house. He just told me, you gotta get good skateboarding, and so I started practicing at a very young age. That's all I did.
When he did something, he did everything full throttle.
I was riding my skateboard everywhere. I rode it to the malls, I took it to school.
He practiced so much that the skateboard became part of him.
Going over and over and over.
Practice, practice, practice.
Skateboard, skateboard, skateboard.
You saw Dennis, you saw him with a skateboard.
And I skated 8 hours a day.
I think one night alone, I counted about 150 times till he learned to stand on his head.
Adding to his natural ability was a nearly unstoppable drive. Hard work often left him satisfied and bleeding.
When Dennis first got into skateboarding, most of the real good equipment was really expensive, and we really couldn't afford that equipment. He would go to La Jolla, and I would park at the bottom of a hill. We'd see a young kid riding a skateboard. Dennis would actually go up and say, "Oh man, that's a really killer board. Could I try it out?" And he would take off. He'd literally steal it. I'd be down the bottom of the hill, and he'd skate down, and he'd jump in the car, and we would take off.
I remember Dennis from when he came up as a kid, and he was like really like a, he was kind of supposed to be like one of the next big things. They were grooming him for a top spot in the company.
He was really intense. He was so intense skateboarding. One time my dad and my mom went, and he was riding up this huge ramp that was so high. He went all the way to the top, started coming down, and he pretty much had my whole family scared from the get-go because it was that kind of intensity that made us worry about him.
Bruce Logan was at ground zero of a revolution that would eventually put the world on wheels. His roots go all the way back to the late 50s.
Was like 14 years old. We were up at La Costa. Was one time I got stuck up there, didn't have any ride home, and here world champion Bruce Logan and his brother Brad, and they gave me a ride home. So can you imagine a world champion skateboarder taking me home, 14 years old as a young kid? I mean, that's all I talked about.
The Logan family, they were probably one of the most well-known families in skateboarding back in the 70s. They had a Logan board.
And the Logan brothers were a unit. They were kind of an enclosed unit, and they talked their own talk, they thought the way they thought, and they had their own trip, so they were kind of impenetrable. And when Bruce was competing, he was in a bubble because he was very fierce and concentrated.
Bruce took every significant title in the 1960s and 70s, including the 1975 and 1976 World Championship. The Logans were called the first family of skateboarding. Together, they founded one of skateboarding's biggest companies, Logan Earth Ski. He was at the top of his game, and his boards were everywhere.
So I would create and invent my own skateboard maneuvers, like the spacewalk, the high pirouette in the air, the high-speed run nose wheelie, and the nose wheelie in the 360s and 720s, and the running 360 dragging your heel, the stop and go, and the headstand spinner. Clear back in 1956, for Christmas, I got a pair of metal steel roller skates, and I couldn't skate on them, so it pissed me off. So I tore them apart and put them on a 2x4 with a milk carton box on the front. And then about 6 months later, I got pretty good on it, and I tore off the milk carton box, and I called it sidewalk surfing. And that was the very first skateboard I ever saw in Los Angeles County.
I remember him tearing skates apart and getting blocks of wood and nailing them on, doing all kinds of things.
Suddenly, the focus in skateboarding shifted from street tricks and downhill to ramps and pools. Then the boys from Dogtown took what nobody was offering. A kid named Jay Adams quickly became one of their leaders.
He's not the kind of kid that could sit still. He's not the kind of kid that could be quiet. He always had to have something going on. It's as if we all have 120 going into us, and he's got 240. So he was always had this intense revved up engine.
You know, was so gifted in certain areas of his existence and so absolutely clueless in others.
Jay Adams used to skate for my team. He was a good friend, and he was quite a competitor in his day.
He was a total troublemaker, and in the funniest way, and completely subversive.
Jay Adams, I think one of the best skaters of all time. He set the bar for, you know, pool skating and street skating. Just the epitome of a surf skater.
skateboarders got higher, Christian Hosoi led the way, breaking all altitude records.
Doing big airs back in the day was just a natural progression. The excitement of spectators that really pumped up the whole atmosphere when you're skateboarding, and the higher you got, the more amped, the more pumped you are. And so to me, it's probably the best feeling in the world.
Christian's one of the greatest skateboarders that has ever lived.
He was the skate star of the 80s. I mean, he's Mr. Style. Plus, he had a personality and a posse.
He was so gifted. He has this sort of star presence. There's something about him.
As far as I'm concerned, he was the best guy out of his particular time zone. You know, the best guy almost ever in terms of what he could do.
When I turned 10, it became an everyday thing. I had 6 to 8 hours a day of skate time. His hair was real long, and I go, man, look at that girl, man, she's a good skater. And it was, no, he was not a girl, he was a little boy. But I mean, everything that he did was just perfect. I mean, flawless. And you just knew that when he grew up that he was gonna be the champ. When he came to skate, he dominated. Was the highest, the most stylish. He took chances, and his attitude was always no hold bar, just all out.
With mentors like Bruce and Jay, along with other great skaters from his own hometown, Dennis soon became a master of vertical, street, and downhill.
You guys were pro. I was just in the little kid side. And I just remember watching, thinking, even if I could do his tricks, I won't be able to have what he has because of the absolute sort of ease and zen-like non-thought you gave it. I was greatly impacted, so it's amazing being next to you now.
I won't tell you the do's and I won't tell you the don'ts. I'll just build the wheels till they manage the most of my time, of my rhymes, of my thoughts, of my actions. Surpass convictions of everyday satisfaction. Transpose with flows, flawless in my timing, adding commas and zeros to this career climbing. Uphill to up and kill doubt, stress, and those enemies that pretend to be friends of my clothes. Who am I? I'm the one with no release date, the one who MC's great like the taste of Philly cheesesteaks. Over beat breaks, I need cake, but won't resort to cheapskate. I make your knees shake, cause every rhyme I spit's a keepsake for Pete's sake. Cookbook's dope and there's no debate. You wish you had a comeback, but no, there is no rebate. Your hopes and dreams that play with every song that I create. Beat me? You must be in a dream state. Freak the format.
Now, if you look into the frontside air, Skateboarder Magazine gave me the skate tip. When Skateboarder Magazine gave the trick to somebody, it was either because they invented it or they mastered it to the fullest.
Dennis Martinez was an awesome freestyle skater, and he was quite a park rider.
Dennis Martinez was one of the best San Diego skaters coming out of the 70s.
But you guys came in force at that contest, and that was the first time I saw, like, wow, that's the real thing.
If it rained, we went to underground parking lots. You know, these are the things that we did all the time. I mean, that's what it took to get to where you needed to go.
Make your heart beat strong. No room to lack. Come whack, you get the gong. You better bring the house down like King Kong. If not, you got to go. If not, you got to go.
Skateboarding exploded, along with a drug epidemic that infected everything, including the sport.
If not, you got to go. If not, you got to go. Simple things become complex while you're frustrated.
Yeah, I'm bad. Like James Brown and Ali. Like X and Garvey. Like Christ himself, I got wealth the most wish they had. I'm bad.
But things Things were still cool with Dennis. TV appearances, commercials, contest winnings, and endorsements gave him and some of his peers a better income than the average bank president.
You hear about Dogtown up in, Venice and things like that. Really, a lot of the skating took place down here in Encinitas, with the Logan, Team Bain, Bobby Piercy, a lot of the OGs. As I started to get going in my professional career, I think that started the end of 1976, 1977, I started getting sponsorships, started getting paid. Sometimes it was $40,000 a month, depending if you did a commercial, or if you got the cover of the magazine, or the centerfold, or you had multiple sponsors paying you at one time. Once you learned how to work the circuit, whatever clothes you wear, you could get paid. Whatever safety equipment you wore, you could get paid. Depending on how good your board sold, that was probably the bulk of it, having 2 or 3 different types of boards with your name on it. It was almost like playing a chess game, trying to figure out how much money you can make, where you can make it, who was paying. You had to produce. You had to be aggressive. There had to be a talk about you, a buzz about you. Hey, did you hear that so-and-so's doing this?
Perhaps luck was on his side. More likely, it was skill, determination, and time served. Regardless, everything came together for Dennis in 1977 when he prevailed over the best in the world.
I was still in high school. I was making a grip of money. I mean, it was the first time that I could ever go buy a car and pay cash for it.
Wanted to be away from home a lot. Probably more than anything else, was away from home too much. And I remember, I think he was probably about 16 when he even had his own apartment.
You have to be 18 to rent. But I walked up to the landlord and I flashed hundreds of dollars a bill, and I think I paid for a full year in advance for my apartment.
Switch it around, whatever I feel like doing, I do. Right now, for me, it's really happening, and I'm just gonna stick in there and push it all the way as long as I can until whatever happens.
In the mid-60s, the counterculture had moved from beer to pot. By the mid-70s, a stronger substance was on the rise.
I'm that voice inside your head that's telling you to do it, and don't you what you must consume an alcoholic fluid. Remember,
I think I was 15 years old when they sent me to Oregon. This guy paid for my way to go out there, and I won't mention his name, but I went to his house and he had a trash can filled to the top full of cocaine. And so I remember, I'm only 15 years old.
Drugs are a real allure to everybody. I was a young kid and I was exposed to all of a sudden making a lot of money and a little bit of fame, and I was smart enough to realize at the time that I was that young that this was not gonna last.
I don't know if everybody makes a conscious effort to live on the edge, I think it was just people, that might have been broke in the past and had some money and they were just partying.
I would stay in my hotel room and not show up at the competition, like at Akron, Ohio for the World Championship. I flew all the way back there just to get high.
I couldn't even leave my hotel room, I was so high. After the World Championships, he spent his whole winnings on dope. We just sat in a hotel room for the whole weekend and just did up thousands of dollars worth of dope.
And there was just a massive amount of cocaine everywhere.
These were strange times. To make matters worse, the 70s skateboard boom was about to go bust. A once thriving industry all but died overnight.
Skateboarding took a nosedive in 1979, and when it did, the whole skate park industry collapsed. It died from a number of things. They made the parks too advanced for the first-time skater, and the liability insurance companies that carried the parks got lawsuits. 200 skateboard parks were bulldozed and the concrete was put in a dump truck and taken to the yard. Logan Ersky, at one time we were the biggest manufacturer in the world. We made as many as 5,000 boards a week. All the manufacturers went out of business except maybe 8 or 10.
The cycle of skateboarding at that time, it seems like it was on a 10-year cycle. It flourished for a while, and then it would wane and be almost non-existent.
It was every 6-7 years, skateboarding would come into its own, and then all of a sudden, kids stopped buying. It was over. I think it's made him feel lost most of these years.
With no place to go, skateboarding took to the streets. Suddenly, kids used to having whatever they wanted were left searching for scraps. Some survived, some rolled with the punches, some died. Many skaters who had merely dabbled in drugs before now depended on them just to get through.
It gives you this false sense of being a Superman. They taste death every single time. Every time that you get high, you're at the brink of death. That was my life from 1980 to 1996. After I progressed from snorting that I wasn't getting high enough anymore, my neighbor that I grew up with turned me on to the needle. The year was 1980.
I kind of turned him on to it. I was smoking weed and drinking, and then speed came along, and I learned how to use a needle, and I turned Dennis onto that, got him hooked on it.
I've always been, even as a little kid, been afraid of needles.
As a little boy, when he went to get his shots, we actually literally had to hold him down when the doctor gave him a shot.
But when he described to me the type of high that it was, and I was already spun out on dope, I was willing to try it just to see what it was like. And I can tell you this, the first time that it happened, the first time that he drew the blood back, the first time that he injected into me, I was hooked.
He got into it pretty heavily, really heavily, I mean, more than me, and he would show up in my place left and right and go, come on, hit me, hit me, hit me.
You gotta hit me up, you gotta hit me up. That's all I could think about. I remember banging on his trailer all the time, bugging him at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, all the time. I disappeared from the face of the earth.
He went Troppo, went over the line.
Talk about rising to the top and then disappearing like that, that was me. Lost everything, lost respect. Nobody wanted to hire me anymore. I had no more sponsorship. My career, everything was over.
Me and my brother were just prowling, I guess is the best way to call it. And I actually went out and I stole a car for purpose of stealing this generator. Once the generator was in there, I had no way to get in. So I kind of jumped in the car and I kind of pinched myself in between the generator and the roof of the car, and we drove down the street with the passenger car door open and my feet dangling out until we could get somewhere and reposition me.
Love, love it, more and love it, more and love it, more and love it, more.
My process was always, I had to rob to get the money, to get the dope. I would have $50,000 to $70,000 cash in a money belt right in front of me, carrying it for a drug dealer and packing a gun. I didn't even make a good drug dealer because if whatever the drugs I had, I would do it up. That's the kind of junkie that I was.
We first met Dennis in what started out to be a long-term investigation into car prowls and the use of methamphetamine.
And when it took over, it took control of everything. Go all week without having gas, go all week without having food. I would have to walk into the store and pretend like I'm shopping and open the package of meat and eat the meat, drink the chocolate milk, leave it in there and walk out, taking showers at the construction sites underneath the little faucet.
The worst drugs for me was cocaine and crystal meth. My pro skateboarding career started going downhill after that.
When the first X Games came out, I was in Japan, and I had a bench warrant out for my arrest for a misdemeanor drug possession. Then I went to Hawaii for 3 months and ended up in the pit of ice, which is crystal meth at a high grade.
I started drinking beers and just smoke weed and Quaalude pills, and then that really opened up the door. If you didn't smoke weed and drink beer and party and stuff, you were considered weird.
I packed a gun all the time. All the time. I mean, if I went to a party, I had a stub-nose 38 in my pocket. I remember so many times fools coming up to me and wanting, to push my buttons. I had a 38 or a 9mm or a 22, and I drove around in my Volkswagen bus. I had a semi-automatic Beretta shotgun. I remember meeting this one guy, and he was a youngster, younger than me, and he had a 38 stub nose, and he used to put the bullet in the chamber and spin it, and that's what they call Russian roulette. And you put it up to your head and you pull the trigger. You got 6 chambers. You got 1 bullet. So what's the odds? You do the math. When he pulled the trigger, he pulled it more than 1 time and ended up shooting himself. He ended up shooting himself, and I heard that after he did it, he stood up and walked. It took a couple steps before he died, and just think, I would have been there. I would have been there in the hotel with him doing that. He's not here. He was 19 years old. He was 19 years old when it took his life. We were so spun out on dope, we didn't care. Man, people just don't know what dope does. Dope stands for death or prison eventually.
And away we go.
True story.
We go.
We were Romney kids.
Oh my goodness sakes, it's hard to go back. He started deteriorating. Not only in his skateboarding, but also in his physical being. You're looking at him. After a while, he almost looked like a little living skeleton. This was all happening from the drugs.
When drugs became severe, so did their consequences.
These cops had drawn their guns. There was probably, I don't even remember how many cop cars there. They were going in, and I remember crying to them, looking at them, saying, "That's my brother. He's not going to do anything." And I remember one of the officers saying, "If your brother has a gun, we're going to kill him."
I've lost so many of my friends. I'm telling you right now, one of them, she died in my arms. She was 7 months pregnant. She was shot through the neck. And as her eyes were closing, I was shaking her, telling her, "Please don't die. I love you, please. Stay, please." And when the guy came back to get the gun to kill me and my friend, to get rid of the witnesses, man, you just don't know. And when you lose your friends, you gotta live with it for the rest of your life.
And I know you don't want.
He OD'd on a bunch of pills.
The first time that I attempted suicide was by my own choice. That's all the heartache, all the failure bottled up inside me, and hear that little voice saying that you should just take your life. It'd be better for everybody. Just do everybody a favor and take your life. And I took 250 pills. And I remember swallowing maybe 25 at a time, and they would just pop out of my mouth, and I was swigging it down with a beer and just taking all of it down at me. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting there, and I'm crying, and I'm talking to my mom, telling her what I did, and I think I collapsed at that time. And the next thing you know, I remember having my stomach pumped. The second time that I OD'd was accidental. It landed me back in the hospital. 30 minutes after I was released, I went back to shooting dope. Next thing you know, I'm laying down on the carpet with a gun to the back of my head, and I'm starting to mouth off to the guys, and they kicked me in the back of the head, smashed my face down, and told me not to move. I don't know what happened, but I got away. I ran to the bathroom, locked the door, and 2 stories, head first, out of the window, and ran. I left everything there.
This is what drugs did to me. This is where it got me. It got me right here on this patch of dirt with a three-man dome tent.
Yes, I'd rather go and play, but I first must let the sun heal me today.
Next thing you know, the drugs take a hold of you and it sucked the life right out of me.
We ended up giving him a Volkswagen bus that we had. And I think he lived in that for a couple of years.
I lost everything. I had no place to live, and then I lost my van and being out on the streets. So this is one of the areas that I used to frequent all the time. In fact, we used to call it home. Didn't care who was around me, I was gonna get high. There was one time that I came down here, and they thought that I had robbed a big shipment of heroin. So it was just me and two guys with a 38 stub nose behind my head, and they were gonna kill me.
You never know what's gonna happen to you, so you have to watch yourself.
Every night I come down here, I'm afraid. It's so dark down here, and you know, there's a lot of spiders. There's a lot of raccoons down here, and they try to come up and get your food. I just want to get my life back. You know, this is not the way of living.
I was totally disrespectful to my father and to my mother, and there was a time where me and my dad got in a confrontation, and I threatened him. I told him, I said, hey, I'm gonna burn your house down. And my dad knew the type of guy that I was at that time, and so he was afraid of me. And so the next day, he went and got a restraining order on me.
He looked like a heavy meth user. He was difficult to follow in conversation. He was pretty far gone.
Dennis was probably too far gone for us to waste our time on. And at that point, we really didn't think that there was much hope for Dennis.
The whole world was closing in on him.
The noose was getting tighter. And so I left California for 5 years.
He started having problems in Colorado, where they actually, SWAT team came and actually kicked down the front door. Trouble would follow him wherever he would go.
I remember going to family functions and sitting down with them and then nodding out because I'd been up for so long.
His teeth were getting discolored. He would just look really unkempt.
I put my mom and dad through hell. I put them through hell. Never knowing when the phone was gonna ring that, hey, Mrs. Martinez or Mr. Martinez, would you come down to the county morgue?
Toughest thing about my job is notifying the next of kin of a sudden traumatic and unexpected death.
My husband and I spent many years, day and night, waiting for phone calls that somebody had killed Dennis.
On a good bender, we call it a binge, a bender, Freddie Fender, I would do drugs all night and all day for up to a week at a time. Then I'd go to the liquor store and get me a jug of vodka, put it in a brown paper sack, and drink it on the beach straight. And I'd get the drive heaves, and I would start throwing up, throwing up, throwing up.
I heard that he was on the beach picking up cans. I was like, what? Are you sure? They're like, yeah, he's been down there for a long time. And I was like, wow, that's sad.
I'd ask people, hey, whatever happened to Christian? People would tell me about how, you know, Christian was all methed out.
Here I am, from 95 to 99, addicted to crystal meth, smoking it, even tried shooting it at one time. Ultimately just was addicted, completely dependent upon it. I've had to, you know, help revive people. I've had to keep people alive while partying right there next to them. Talk about insane, you know what I mean? Think about that. You're sitting there and somebody's like almost dying and you're yet keeping them alive, but yet still partying the same drug that nearly killed that person. And you're doing it, pushing the limits of life. And so many of my friends have just pushed it to the limit and fell off and died. And yet I still continued to use drugs. Ignorantly. Living ignorantly, thinking I'm invincible, I'm untouchable. I know how to do this. I'm smart. Everyone thinks they're smarter than someone else that doesn't make it.
He didn't look good. He looked really bad, so it kind of wasn't a surprise to me. All of a sudden, he's on his way to prison.
Christian's story wasn't a big shock. that he went to prison?
My arrest was pretty surprising.
Drugs was never an issue in my house. I had a really, really good childhood with Kent and my mom. My mom was like my best friend until she died.
I think the only tools he had, you know, to deal with that were getting loaded and getting violent.
Jay was all about punk rock, pedal to the metal.
When the punk rock days came out, every night was just drinking beer, going up to Hollywood, and, you know, in order for me to have a good night, somebody had to have a really bad night. I had a taste of the heroin, and things really got bad. I mean, really bad. I used toilet water, gutter water. I shared needles with guys that looked like they were dying of AIDS. They were HIV positive, and I didn't even care. I really didn't care if I lived or died.
Years of abuse would finally catch up with Dogtown's favorite son. The price of dope had escalated far beyond its street value.
$1996, September 5th, it was my last run.
Dennis went through, probably been on a 3 or 4 day drug binge, and I knew something was wrong, terribly wrong. He was crying, and he was in a corner, just tucked in a corner in his room.
I knocked on the door, and I hear this voice come across. Yeah. How can you come up from that type of sitting position, flat on the floor like this, and you just move up? It made me feel that something had manifested.
That night I met the devil that was eating inside my brother. I mean, was throwing him around the room.
You tell me, right there, it's right there, right by you, Mom, right by you.
Dennis had believed that he had killed someone. My mother and father did come over to the house, and they were going to take him to the church.
He was at his very last straw. I just saw a lot of anguish in his face, and he wasn't looking at me, he was looking at the ground, and he had been crying, you could tell. I realized real quickly that he was non-receptive, and every time I'd asked him a question, he was very agitated. He basically looked up, and this is the first time he had eye contact with me, and he said, "What are you talking about?" I says, "Dennis, what do you hear?" He said, "I hear the clock. What are you talking about?" "I hear the clock." I said, "In the same way that you now have the discipline to hear the ticking of the clock, you now know that God, in the same way, has been speaking to you, and He has a plan for your life, and that there was this transforming moment, that he was never the same." And I had never seen Dennis Martinez look back.
There was a definite change. Dennis was never the same.
My life has changed forever now because of one right decision in my life.
That he would volunteer his time at the Youth Crisis Hotline. He would come and say, whatever you want me to do, I'm there to help. Whatever it was, Dennis Martinez was there.
You know, I've been 9 years clean and sober, and I keep repeating numbers because I keep tabs of every day walking clean and sober.
Spiritual markers in your life actually come to life, like just being nicknamed Christ in '85, inventing the Christ era in the late '80s, and ultimately my name is Christian in the first place. Wore crosses my whole life. It is quite ironic. In January of 2000, I go to prison and finally hit rock bottom and realized, what am I here for? Why was I created? Why is this happening to me? Why? I'm sitting here making my first phone call from prison to Jennifer, going, look, I'm looking at 10 years. I don't know what's gonna happen. Of course, I was bawling my eyes out, but she was like, you know, I love you, we're gonna try to get through this, but we just have to trust in God. And right there, I was like, God? You know, what's God gonna do for me? I was like, I need a lawyer, babe. I've never opened the Bible before in my whole entire life. And here I am, in a situation, opening up a Bible, don't even know what for, seeking God because I'm finally in a place where everything's been cut. All my lines have been cut. And I open it up to Kings, I start reading, and it was like God was speaking to me saying, this is who I am. This is how I function through people, in people. This is my forgiveness. This is my mercy. And I tell you, it was like the whole world and all the burdens of my life and all the shame and all the guilt just fell off my shoulders. And I was free.
Jay being in jail, I think, is probably the best thing that happened to either one of us.
Since I've come here, you know, I've opened up my Bible, I've read it, I've had time to get to know God, and for the last 20 years or however long it's been since I accepted Christ in Hermosa Beach, I wondered why I never had that overnight changing experience, you know, where I'd magically not want to sin as much anymore. Because of her, I wanted to better myself. It's incredible how much God has been with us throughout this whole time. We've both grown so much in the Lord. We both actually know Him now, and we pray together, and there's just a lot of changes in our life that I can see, you know, that I've never felt before.
What finally got me clean and sober was giving up my using friends, the people I hung around with, and all the street people and homeless people that lived with me. I got away from them because they were all into the lie, cheat, and steal game morning, noon, and night. I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous at the Step House in Lacadia, and I go there every morning for the 7 a.m. Attitude Adjustment meeting.
After getting clean and sober, Dennis launched a campaign to help others. He found the rush he sought in dope as soon as he moved beyond it.
The winds of life breathe and bring strife. The rain came and gone, but the pain still remains strong. So I sing this song to remember a new day of life brings a new dawn, a new dawn. The winds of life breathe and bring strife. The rain came and gone, but the pain still remains strong. So I gather guidance to self and proceed to defeat in times of being weak with God's help.
Been in prison for going on 21 years now. 6 years, going on 7.
20 years.
On 185 to life.
I'm serving 11 life sentences. They say that I'll never be home again.
Here at Calipatria State Prison, we have over 4,200 inmates. 80% of those inmates won't be going home.
I'm a volunteer prison chaplain at a level 4 prison. Tell them about the Lord.
Drugs, it only leads to prison or hell.
Drugs, our gangs, our money, and all that is not the answer.
The winds of life breathe and bring strife. The rain came and gone, but the pain still remains strong.
Now he works day and night, teaching addicts and alcoholics to cope with everyday life.
That's all I want them to do, is to make it in life, to get their lives back, to get their wives back, to get their children back, to never go back to prison, to never be on parole again, to expunge their number, to live free when you're driving and not have to look in the rearview mirror and see a police officer behind you.
Dennis's interaction here is second to none because he knows all about the deep inner workings of these men.
Life at the training center is a flurry of activity of men dealing with all their issues, of entering back into life again, coming from behind bars or from off streets. And what they're doing is they're trying to get back the feeling of just the simple things like eating a meal.
Yeah, dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this lunch, Lord, for another beautiful day.
They've got children looking at them now to be a father. They've got, here now, I've got to go to work.
I was in church and I fell on my face drunk, literally, slammed teeth and all, nothing breaking the fall. And now I'm a counselor here.
14 years heroin addiction and 10 years of crack. And at the end,
At the end of the backslider, I ended up shooting up heroin and coke together, and this was my last run.
And I dream of a place with no steam. And I pray.
It has to be a God thing, because knowing him now, I can't imagine him then. I want to continue this thing. This is my retirement plan. I don't have a retirement plan. This is it, to work with him.
So when you gonna shine your spotlight down on the darkness round me? Oh, Gracie, you're the only thing I see. I heard you done real good for me down at the county line tree. Oh, Gracie, you're the only thing I see. And I'm free with your arms like an arm around me.
I was slamming dope behind dumpsters and alleys behind the bar. I should be dead. Absolutely dead. And I'm not, by the grace of God.
And I went to the training center. I've been here for the last 4 months. I just graduated. God has been working in my life. God has gave me back my wife. He's gave me back my kids. And for me, that's a blessing.
We started a little prison gang, right? We came up with the name Mexican Mafia, and I shot heroin for 23 years. I know, man, if it wasn't for me using heroin, I wouldn't have done what I did. And I kept running into Dennis, other outreaches in prisons, and we became friends, man.
Well, I think Dennis Martinez's ministry is one of the greatest ministries you can be in. I love it so much because Dennis is the kind of guy where he spent most of his life staying out of jail, and now he can't resist but to go in.
He's been a good stepdad. He teaches me a lot. I want to be able to be like him.
My dad loved me very much.
No matter how lost, all souls can come home.
Over the rainbow, in color red schemes and playing in mystical themes, and how we used to laugh at the day glow, and coming back from the beach and unlock the door for me. We're not 16 anymore. We know love can burn your feet while you're trying to cross the street. Hearts can be broken, God knows, and I'm responsible for you and you for me. It was a pool party where the innocence was lost. Well, it was a short walk to the parking lot. How much since then have we lost? How much more can something cost? Because we're not 16 anymore. We know love can burn your feet while you're trying to cross the street.
She died in my arms.
One of the guys died.
When I go to prison,
I got arrested, encountered in jail, and come back to
Death
prison.
or prison eventually.
I don't even remember how many cop cars
SWAT
there.
team came and actually kicked
If
out
your
my
brother
brother.
has a gun, we're gonna kill him.
Fell off and died.
Cop showed up at my house, my sister died.
The noose was getting tighter.
We have 1 minute remaining for this call.
Can I call you later? Because we gotta get locked down.
It hasn't always gone my way. It hasn't always gone my way. Doesn't mean it wasn't meant to be. Doesn't mean that I have been so selfish. It hasn't always gone my way. It hasn't always gone my way. Doesn't mean it wasn't meant to be. Doesn't mean that I have been so selfish.
I bought a pretty birdie rather early in the daytime. Let it fly away and saw it headed towards the grapevine. Feeling like I need a little freedom from the heat. Indeed, I'm beating up my spirit, wanna trade it with a parakeet. Praying for the barricade to break and take the pain away. I wait, bathing in the lake of my mistake. Aching for your grace, your ways are great, Father, you're awesome.
Wound up getting off parole. I did 5 years to the day. They wouldn't let me out early because I was so violent. But it doesn't matter because I have the rest of my life parole because the 2 strikes don't go away. So I have to live with that. In California, 3 strikes, you're out, 25 to life.
Around and I'm lost, and the dawn has risen on your garden, which I am so far from. Tempted on the mountain I got, but I'm falling, carrying my coffin, heavy like your crosses, wandering around and I'm lost and I'm lost.
It hasn't always gone my way. It hasn't always gone my way. Doesn't mean it wasn't meant to be. Doesn't mean that I have been so selfish. It hasn't always gone my way. It hasn't always gone my way. Doesn't mean it wasn't meant to be. Doesn't mean that I have been so selfish.
Worst case scenario, unprepared for the merry-go-round. Spinning and pins of the horse, of course I just wanna get down. It'll belittle me, really, stomach is turning and twisting, plunging and pumping like pistons, instantly sicker than sick. History snickers at me, broker than ever could be. I'm over the threat of defeat, but under debris. Reaching for reasons for me to preach at the prison. So give me wisdom to overcome this bridge and this haunted system. Do you promise that you'll hold me often? Cleanse me with your fountain, even when my soul is in doubt and I'm falling, carrying my.
You know, it's funny because when I think about Christian Hosoi, I mean, when I come from England back in the day, I'm sitting on the couch one day watching this video someone had recorded for me. Christian in spandex up and down this ramp, being flamboyant, competing with Tony Hawk, and I mean that influenced my skating right then.
It hasn't always gone my way. Doesn't mean it wasn't meant to be. Doesn't mean that I have been so selfish. It hasn't always gone my way. It hasn't always gone my way. Doesn't mean it wasn't meant to be. Doesn't mean that I have been so
You wouldn't wanna look into my face back in 1978 and see a baby that a mother can hate, then look away. Mama never rocked me to sleep. Daddy was a creep. Mama crept and left me on the doorstep. As I slept, bundled, nestled in the basket, she sends me floating down the LA River. God forgive her. I knew it back then that action was just a fraction of my life's conquest. Moses, a paradox of unorthodox type of hard knock life, traumatized with no sight. You wouldn't want to look into my mind back in 1979 and look inside and tell me what you can find. Don't ever mind. Aching for your grace and your ways are great. You're so awesome. Dream catchers couldn't catch me, but I'm falling. But I'm falling, carrying my coffin, heavy like your crosses, wandering around and I'm lost and I'm lost.
I started doing drugs when I was like 11. I've been clean for 6 months. 6 months yesterday, actually. I don't have any time to get loaded or get all stupid, you know what I mean?
Still, some of my friends I hang out with now, they smoke weed every single day, get drunk, and I don't drink or smoke. And some of them will just, like, as a comment, like, we're hanging out, like, how can you just not smoke? What makes you not drink? Like, you're always around it. And I just tell them, like, I don't know, I grew up and I just knew that I had to get away from all of that.
The people that I see mostly in here, I would say that drugs account for 90% of the time.
I used to bail out opium people. The worst thing, though, is the meth.
world of skateboarding would never be the same. They rose to the top. They fell to the bottom. They rose again. Death destroyed.